We're going to learn about Rosh Shimon ben Pazi today. Why was he called Rosh Shimon ben Pazi? Very unique name. We don't see the name too often. So we'll learn about it in the Gemara today. We're here holding in the Gemara Mesechta Megillah Daf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph 23a. Holding approximately in the middle of the page. Yesterday, the Gemara brought a brisa. Who does it go according to? Rabbi Shmuel or Rabbi Akiva? And the Gemara says, the Rabbi says, it's Rabbi Shmuel, because we have another brisa of Rabbi Shmuel, which teaches like our Mishnah. And the Gemara says, you have two different Rabbi Shmuels, and we say, yes. Sometimes you have Trei Tanoia, Libed Rabbi Shmuel, two versions of what the same person said.
How would you take issue with that?
That's very possible. Sometimes that could happen, and that was yesterday's Gemara. We said Trei Tanoia, Libed Rabbi Shmuel. You have two different teachings in the name of Rabbi Shmuel. It's possible he said one at one time, one at the other time. It's possible one misunderstood, but two different teachings according to Rabbi Shmuel. We brought another brisa which says perhaps we could be a proof according to Rabbi Akiva that on Yom Kippur you have 7 aliyos instead of 6, because a brisa which states on Yom Kippur people come later to shul. On Yom Tov people come later to shul because they have to get ready for a meal. They leave shul early because they want to go home to have the enjoyment of the meal. On Shabbos, people leave shul early they don't stick around because they need to go home and have the suda, the meal, with their families. On Yom Kippur, when there's no meal, people have time. Maybe you should have 7 aliyos. And we're assuming that it's aliyos and the Misha Berach and the Gabbai trying to make everybody pledge more and more, which causes a person to causes davening to go long. And the Gemara says no. We could be even according to Rabbi Shmuel that there are only 6 aliyos on Yom Kippur and enough v'shidur d'yoma. On Yom Kippur we have extra long davening, and that's why we are longer in shul, not because of an extra aliyah, but it could be we have 6 aliyos on Yom Kippur, not 7, and people have extra long davening. There are some communities, even some nusachs, which don't say Ein Kelekenu on Yom Kippur. We say at the end of davening, on Shabbos, and end of davening every day, Ein Kelekenu, they don't say it on Yom Kippur. And the reason is because people are in shul for so long, and so many hours, and traditionally there would be no break between Musaf and Mincha. They would go straight from one prayer to the next. They would start in the morning, go on till at night. Coming to the end of the day, they have no koyach, no more strength, and they would not say Ein Kelokenu. Ein Kelokenu, it's a very unique type of prayer. It says on Shabbos, when you cannot say 100 brachas, 100 blessings, Ein Kelokenu is counted as many of those brachas, many of those blessings. Because we say, Baruch Elokeinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Mosheinu.
Maybe in Yom Kippur you don't have that problem. Maybe you do.
On Yom Kippur, you don't say as many blessings. You don't have any meals on Yom Kippur. What? So those baruchs. So right. So some people opinions say that those baruchs all count as a blessing. To count up to the number of 100 brachas, 100 blessings. Some say Ein Kelokenu is instead of karbanos, instead of bringing sacrifices in the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, on Yom Kippur, you don't bring individual karbanos, individual sacrifices. And you don't say it on Yom Kippur. However, nowadays, people just not, they're not made the way they used to be made. And people are a lot weaker constitutions, and we all have a long break between Musaf and Mincha, and therefore we say Ein Kelokenu, but we do it after Ne'ilah. So it's already after the day is over, we say Ein Kelokenu. We say like all other days. But it all boils down to what it says over here, Nafish Sidur D'Yoma. Yom Kippur has extra long davenings. So either we don't need Ein Kelokenu, or we should not say Ein Kelokenu, but nowadays people don't have the same level. Shabbos, also the Ramah writes in Shulchan Aruch, the commentary in Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah writes that we lengthen, we have a longer davening on Shabbos than during the week. During the week, we have Psukei de Zimra. We have, starting from Ashrei, the verses of praise to Hashem, and we go to the end of Tehillim, the last 6 chapters of Tehillim, and then we do several parts of Nevi'im, and then we do Oz Yashir. On Shabbos, we add a lot more chapters of Tehillim. And he says every place has its own minhag, its own custom, and you could do it. Then he quotes this Gemara. He says, "Nafesh sidur diyoma." The day is very long. Although it says that about Yom Kippur, the day is very long. But we could apply it to Shabbos, like Rabbi Label said yesterday. Sidur diyoma. We said yesterday, Yom Kippur is called Shabbos Shabbosin, the Shabbos of all Shabboses. So you have a mini aspect of Yom Kippur on every single Shabbos, which is a day of forgiveness, Mechila Kapara, and you have that in the spiritual rules as well, brought down by the Mesechta Eliezer. It was actually, interestingly, one of the visions to Rebbe's also. The Mesechta Eliezer, Rishayim, evildoers who are getting punished in Gehenna, in purgatory, on Shabbos, they don't get punished. On Shabbos, they're taken out of their punishment. So a day like Shabbos is like a sort of mini Yom Kippur. So therefore, as the Ramah writes, we have extra prayers that we add on during davening on Shabbos as well. Now, we mentioned yesterday, it's a big mitzvah to help your wife. A very big mitzvah. To the extent that it says, Mimarin, Ma'acharin, on Yom Tiv, on the holidays, when people have to make food, cook food, shech their animals, they will be able to come, they would typically come late to shul because they will be helping their wives. Although you're not allowed to do your own needs before Shacharis. You're not allowed to do any of your own personal needs. What could you do before Shacharis? Well, feed your animals, because Sar Ba'alei Chaim, pain to animals, it's a very serious thing. You have to feed them before anything else. And if you have no one to do it for you on Shabbos, you have to do it yourself. Furthermore, there's a obligation to prepare for davening, which is learning, but these are all spiritual things. Your own needs you cannot do. So how could they go ahead and come late to shul because they're preparing a meal? You're not allowed to work in the kitchen before davening Shacharis. The answer is, if you're doing a mitzvah, you're allowed to. And the mitzvah of simcha, of joy on Yom Tiv, is a mitzvah from the Torah. V'samachta b'chagecha. Be happy in your holidays. And if you're being osit b'mitzvah, if you're doing a mitzvah and it cannot be done later, you could do it before davening. So therefore, they are allowed to help in the kitchen before davening, or help their wives and watch the kids while their wives are in the kitchen. And even more than that, the Yaibitz of Yaakov Endin, he adds on that helping your wife itself is enough of a mitzvah. And you're allowed to, you don't need any other reasons for Simchas Yom Tiv, joy of Yom Tiv. Helping your wife alone is called, it's a mitzvah of tzedakah. Tzedakah is charity. And if you're the only one in the world who's able to do a certain type of tzedakah, a certain type of charity, you have to do it. And the mitzvah of tzedakah for your spouse is you're the only one in the world who's able to do it. No one else could do it like you. So therefore, you are allowed to do it also before davening. Nosson Tzvi Finkel, familiar? Rosh Yeshiva Amir. So he says it's considered to be an idea of chesed. So let us continue in the Gemara. So we spoke about all the different days. How many aliyos, how many people are called to the Torah on any given day? On Monday, Thursday, Shabbos, Mincha, it's 3 people. And we gave a reason corresponding to Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael. On Rosh Chodesh, it's 4, and Chol HaMoed, it's 4 people called to the Torah because there's a carbon musaf. On Yom Tov, it's 5 people because there's extra karbanos and more prohibitions of labor. On Yom Kippur, it's 6 people because there's an extra prohibition of doing any type of malacha, sort of like Shabbos, and a stricter punishment penalty. And on Shabbos, where there's nowhere to run, no work to run to, it's a holiest day, we do 7 aliyos. The Gemara already established that. The Gemara is now going to bring different opinions. Why do we have different amounts of aliyos? And we'll give it a lot of nice answers. Why do we need it again? We already went through this once. That's a question Tosfos asks over here. We had we had 2 blot ago, Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. So 3 pages ago, we already learned about the different numbers of aliyos. The Gemara is going to go through it again. So what the Gemara is adding on over here is what we did not add on, or we did not say over there. And it's important that although misvara, logically, things can make sense, you always try your best to find a source in the Torah for it. We're going to now bring several psukim, several verses, which bring up different numbers, 3, 5, 7. We're not going to do every single number. We're going to skip 4. Even 6 is not going to be a direct pasuk. We're going to have just sort of a sort of proof for it. And there are questions, which we're not going to get into, which could be asked on many of the reasons given before. So as a support, as an extra support, we'll bring a proof, a source from the pasuk, why we have a certain amount of aliyos, a certain amount of people called for every single one. So we're going to first have for 3, 5, 7, a second reason for 3, 5, 7, and then a reason given for 6. But this is not the main reasons. The main reasons is for the reasons we gave before on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. And this is what the Ritva writes. It says the Gemara, Hani Shlosha Chamisha Veshiva Keneged Mi. You have some days you have 3 people called to the Torah. Some days you have 5 people called to the Torah. Some days you have 7 people called to the Torah. Who do these correspond to? So Pligiba, Rabbi Yitzchak, Bar Nachmani v'Chad Imei. There were different reasons given, and Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachmani goes on Rabbah, generally. So perhaps some of his children, which will be mentioned over here, several children who are Bar Nachmani, but not necessarily. So Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachmani, V'chad Imei, and one of his colleagues, meaning a Torah scholar who was together with him, they each gave their own reasons why we have different amounts of aliyos. Umanu, who was that other scholar that was together with Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachmani? Reb Shimon ben Pazi. It was Reb Shimon ben Pazi. Let's read the next line. We'll just describe a little bit who Reb Shimon ben Pazi was. V'amrila, and some have a different version over here, that the discussion was between, you sort of switch the opinions around. There's Shimon ben Pazi v'chad imei. There is Shimon ben Pazi and one scholar who was with him. Umanu, and who is that scholar who was with Shimon ben Pazi? Yes, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachmani. It was Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Nachmani, son of Rabbi. The Amrila, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. And some say it was Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. Some say that Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani himself said this. Who are these people and why are we quoting the name? So the name was Shimon ben Pazi. He's brought down, when it comes to the halacha in Gemara, only once in the entire Shas. When we're discussing the Jewish calendar, he has a very unique input. When he was a student of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, I think Rabbi Chalafta ben Doisa as well.
And they were what is she? Rabbi
Yechon ben Afcha. He was Amarayim, correct. He was in the second half of the 3rd century.
Hmm.
He lived in the south of Eretz Yisrael. When it comes to Haggadah, to the esoteric and the sort of explanations on like Medrash style, he's quoted many times, dozens, perhaps hundreds of times he's quoted. He explains the 13 Midos HaRachamim over here in Bereshis, Chumash Bereshis, 2nd Aliyah. It says, "Vayitzer Hashem Elokim es Adam Ofer min Adama." Hashem created the person. Hashem created man from the ground, and he's the one who explains why does the word Vayitzer have 2 yuds over here, as highlighted on the screen. Why 2 yuds for the word Vayitzer? When you pronounce only one, you don't say Vayitzer, Vayitzer. And he says, because when Hashem created man, he created him with 2 Yitzers. Yetzer is an inclination, a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara, a positive inclination, a negative inclination. One of the famous Gemaras, Rabbi Shimon bar Pazi, is a famous disagreement. It's Gemara Yerushalmi, which says, what is the most important pasuk and most important verse in the Torah, which includes everything else? And there's 3 opinions. The Nana says, like Hillel says, "V'hafta l'reacha kamocha," love your fellow as yourself. Shimon ben Pazi says, Ben Zoyma says, "Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one." Ben Nana says, love your fellow as yourself. There was another opinion which says, Zev Sefer told us Adam. Basically, this is a creation of man. So Shimon ben Pazi gets up and says, with every single day, in Parshas Pinchas, you bring a daily sacrifice to Hashem. 1 in the morning, 1 at night.
Oh, the pasuk is that it's supposed to be like the claw portion.
Yeah, and and a certain scholar, doesn't say who it is, stood up and he said Allah is like Ben Pazi, Shimon ben Pazi, which is a very unique thing. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. What greater unification is there? How many Jews gave up their lives while saying Shema Yisrael? Every Jew before they die and say Shema Yisrael. But that's dying hero's death. So, and that's serious nefesh, giving your life up for Hashem, giving your existence away to Hashem. When Hashem created the world, tremendous creation, to keep every single, to love every Jew, it means put yourself on the side. However, this idea of 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, Shacharis in the morning, Mincha Ma'ariv at night, every single day, consistency, that's more important than everything else. Because great moments are great, but that pales in comparison to being consistent every single day. 1 in the morning, 1 at night, Shacharis in the morning, Ma'ariv at night, a carbon in the morning, a carbon at night. Pazi is not a man's name. Where does the name Pazi come from? So there's a famous Rabbi Yossi ben Pazi, a story brought down in the Gemara. There was Rabbi Abba opened up a yeshiva, and he says, whoever wants riches, glory, and honor, come to my yeshiva. And many students came to his yeshiva and started learning Torah. And one day, a young man came to yeshiva and he says, I heard the ad. If you come to my yeshiva, you have glory, riches, and honor. Can I come in your yeshiva? So he says, what's your name, my son? He said, my name is Yossi. He says, come stay in my yeshiva, start learning. You get your money, glory, and honor. And for several years, he studies and studies. He was poor as ever, but he gained tremendous respect from everyone. Finally comes to Rabbi Abba and he says, I've been here for a while. When's the money coming? When's the check? It's in the mail, as they say. So Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Abba told him, already half of the check's in the mail. Stay a little longer, you'll see the other half. He returned studying and studied even more diligently. A rich man came to yeshiva, brought with him a large amount of gold and precious coins, and he gave it to Rabbi Abba, and he said, I want to support your students, and I want to have a share in the Torah which they're studying. So Rabbi Abba chose, and he says, this is really diligence in studying. And he loved it. And he kept on studying more. One day he found him crying. He says, why are you crying? He says, now I finally appreciate the greatness of Torah. And I saw the greatness and the value of Torah for something else, for gold and silver. David HaMelech said that Torah is more precious than thousands of gold and silver treasures, and I sold it for his gold and silver treasure. I'm now happy. I want to learn Torah Lishma for its own sake. So then Rabbi Abba finally gave a kiss to Rabbi Yossi on his forehead. He says, now I could call you Ben Pazi, because now you finally, you came to appreciate Torah for its own sake. In the beginning, you came to Torah because of the gold. But now you came to Torah because you realize that's more precious than gold and silver. So Pazi means gold in Aramaic. It means shining gold, like a refined gold. Dahava is regular gold, and Pazi is Paz, like the beautiful gold. That's Rabbi Yossi ben Pazi. So the Shimon ben Pazi, either it could have been someone who was very wealthy. There's another opinion which says that he was actually a grandson of the great Reb Chia. The great Reb Chia, who was one of the greatest Meroim of all time. If not for him, Torah would have been forgotten. He had the power to bring Mashiach, greatness which talks about Reb Chia. He was Reb Chia was actually his father's father, but he was named for his mother. Pazi was a woman's name, and sort of like just Shena, which means beautiful. Pazi is like a name which means beautiful, because there might have been something not good with his father, something which is interesting, because Reb Chia's sons were greatest tzaddikim. So the Gemara brings about them that he's buried in a cave together with his sons, and it was dangerous to even walk in from the light. People became blind to walk in. Him and his sons davened together, and when they were saying Mechaya Mesim, the dead would have come back to life, and Eliyahu had to stop them. But there's another interesting aspect, which is all conjecture from different, not my own, from the Farshim, which say there's a story of Shmuel, or one of Shmuel's daughters. It's a story in itself, in Mesechta Brachas, I think.
Bar Shmuel, right? Yeah.
Which one of his daughters was one time captured by some non-Jewish roving bandits. This was unfortunately common back then. And she was abducted, and she was forced to have relations with whoever it was, non-Jewish captors. And she had children from that. And so this was one of the children. And Shmuel had a grandson, so he was Jewish because his mother is Jewish. But he's named for his mother, not for his father. Because his father wasn't a big yichus to have, but he's named for his mother. So perhaps Shimon ben Pazi, although being a grandson of Reb Chia, unfortunately back then, such things were common, as we will see in the Gemara itself now. The Gemara will now bring something similar to that. So perhaps, say he was, Shimon ben Pazi was a grandson of Reb Chia, but he was named after his mother, not after his father.
But it's interesting, you see, that even if a part of your family tree is not the best, you still can actually boast about the yichus from the other part of the
Correct. Family. You're able to boast about the yichus from the other side. Right. So says the Gemara, these two opinions, one is Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani, and the other one is Reb Shimon ben Pazi. Chad Amar, one of them said, this corresponds to the verses in Birchas Kohanim. I brought up a picture of it over here. There are 3 verses in the blessing of the Kohanim. We say it every morning during during Brachas. Kohanim say it. It's said every day during repetition of the Amidah. First one is 3 verses. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha. Hashem bless you and protect you. 3 verses. Second one is 5 verses. Ya'ir Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka. 5 words in the second verse. Third verse has 7 words. Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasim lecha shalom. May Hashem gave you lift his face, a shining countenance to you, and give you shalom, give you peace. And so corresponding to that, we have some days of Torah reading have 3 aliyos, some have 5 aliyos, some have 7 aliyos. We learned previously in the Gemara Mesechta, we learned a mimer about Birchas Kohanim, explaining how every pasuk and every word corresponds to different levels. Why is 1:3, 1:5, 1:7, going to different spheres, etc. Because you're bringing the blessing down, and the blessing of the Kohanim is very intense. So the first one is the essential blessing. There's 3 corresponding to Chachma Bina Das. And then the second one is 5. You're bringing down that godliness into a lower level. Till the 7 is the 7 midas, bringing it down all the way to Malchus. The Malbim, Meir Leibish, what was his last name? Remember right now? The Malbim, not a chassid. He lived. He was in candidacy to. He lived during the times of the Rebbe Marash and the Rebbe Rashab. He was in candidacy to become a chief rabbi of New York. They were going to bring him down. The story of the Rebbe Rashab. Rebbe Rashab told him against it, and so he didn't do it. And then later on, he accepted the position. And the Rebbe Rashab said how it's really not good for him to do it. And after he accepted the position, he passed away. He never made it here. So Meir Leibush, Ben Michal, the Malbim, he has a beautiful pirush on this, and he explains the first blessings. The first pasuk is may Hashem bless you and protect you. And this is going on the essential blessings a person needs. Baruch Yivarechecha. Only time it says Baruch, blessing, in the blessing of Kohanim is the first word. Yivarechecha means Baruch atah ba'ir, bless are you in the city, Baruch atah b'sada, in the field. She'yizborchu nechasecha, as Rashi says, may your assets become blessed. It includes health. V'yishmerecha means and to guard your health. Shirach min mazikin, from things which harm you. Also from your Yetzer Hara, protect you from a bad temper. A bracha, a blessing is given, but it needs shmira. If you can become very wealthy, but if people steal it, your wealth does not help you. So you need Yivrechecha, blessing, and Yishmerecha, and guarding. A person could lose it based on their own temper. They could lose their great blessings that they have. They could be weak, and they cannot appreciate all the goodness that they have. So on a weekday is when we work. So the first blessing of Birchas Kohanim, the first pasuk has 3 words corresponding to weekday. Because on weekday we have to work, we need a bracha, bircha, as we're learning at great length in Kunt Sumayan. God will bless you in all that you do. God will bless your parnasa. And Ishmerecha, Hashem has to guard it for us. So on a weekday, we work for a living and we have to have protection. So then we have 3 psukim corresponding to the first pasuk of Birchas Kohanim. 3 aliyos corresponding to the 3 words of the first bracha of Birchas Kohanim. The second verse, Yorer Hashem panav, may Hashem shine His face towards you. Who in history had their face shiny? Moses, when he came off the mountain. Is shine from the neshama. If you see a tzaddik and his face is shining, it's not a shining of a natural shining, it's a shechina. The neshama is over here in a dark prison, so you could say, in this world, and it has to be wandering among foreign, it's in captivity, it's held hostage by the body, and we have to shine a light for it. And the mitzvah is Atanir, you are Hashem. And Vichuneka is, may you find favor. On Yom Tov is a spiritual day. Yom Tov, we don't work. Yom Tov, we deal with a spiritual aspect of a day. And therefore, on Yom Tov corresponds to the second verse, which has 5 words. And in Yom Tov, you have 5 aliyos. The third verse says, Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasim lecha shalom. May Hashem lift his face towards you, meaning go directly face to face with happiness, and to place among you peace. When someone is not interested in talking to you, say, hey, I need your attention. And you turn them and say, oh, I need your attention. No sleeping. Even if we Jews, God forbid, did something wrong, listened to our Yetzer Hara and sinned, but we have a chelek elikami mal mamash, as a Malbim quoting Netanya, interestingly, says we have a piece of Hashem inside of us. So even if we sin, it's not from our neshama, not from our piece of God, from our soul. It's our body which sins. But who we really are is our neshama, our soul. And Hashem has mercy upon us. And even if we're not deserving, Hashem will pay attention to us. Yisa Hashem. Hashem will lift up his face towards us, give us attention. Even if we are not deserving, because knowing that I should be upset at you, it's not you. You know, if my daughter, falls down on the floor and hurts herself and now starts getting angry and slapping Tati or something like that, and if you've experienced that, that has to do, you're upset at her, she hurt herself, right? And we can see we could do to help her. So Hashem helps us. Hashem lifts his face towards us. And that happens on Shabbos. On Shabbos, when the real us comes out on Shabbos. On Shabbos, when a Jew could daven at length, a Jew could learn, they don't have to run to work. Meaning this is where we want to be the whole time. And on Shabbos, the real us comes out. And Hashem pays attention to us. And then he says, V'yasim lecha shalom, and give you peace. It says, shalom, peace, is the key to all success. When a person is not nervous, when a person's at peace, when you're calm, that's when you're most successful. When a person has peace, when you make peace, it says, Hashem will give them blessings of nachas. Hashem forgives averos, forgives sins if people make peace with each other. Why did Hashem not destroy the generation of the Daraflaga, the generation of the built the Tower of Babel, but he did destroy the generation of the Mabel, although both rebelled against Hashem, because they were at peace with each other. So Hashem did not destroy them. On Shabbos, it says, whoever guards Shabbos, Hashem, whoever watches Shabbos with all the halachas, Hashem forgives all their sins. So therefore, on Shabbos is also a time of shalom, a time of peace, a time of the ultimate blessing. We're only going to have good. So therefore, on Shabbos corresponds to the last pasuk, and in the last pasuk of the blessing of Kohanim, there are 7 words. So on Shabbos we have 7 aliyos. So that is one explanation. Now, the Chadamar, and the other opinion, which could be either Rishim ben Pazi, Rabbi Yisrael ben Nachmani, or Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachmani, one of those 3. The other opinion says the reason why we have 3, 5, and 7 is Keneged Shlosha Shomer Hasaf, Hamisha Mirei Pnei Hamelech, Shiva Rei Pnei Hamelech. Let's go into a little bit of sad Jewish history. This is some of the saddest chapters in the entire Tanakh. Chapter 2 of Melachim is perhaps the saddest chapter in the whole Nach, which describes the Nebuchadnezzar sent a general who was like a Hitler and a Hamas combined, and they were extremely brutal and cruel to what they did to all the Jews. We learned this at length in Mesechta Megillah. There were several stages. In the 9th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, that's when he came against Yerushalayim. He camped against it, and he held it in siege for 3 years. And everybody there was starving, and the city was broken into. And they caught King Sidkiah. They found him miraculously, and they brought him to a judgment in front of Nebuchadnezzar. And each one said, kill me, you're all going to be killed. Kill me before the other one. Sidkiah said, I don't want to see my children getting killed. And his children said, we don't want to see our father getting killed. And Nebuchadnezzar knew a little bit of human psychology. I knew that it's much, much harder for a father to see the children getting killed. And all of Tzidkiyahu's children were slaughtered in front of his eyes. Tzidkiyahu himself was blinded, and he was put into prison for many, many years, till the end of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, about 30 years. We learned the exact numbers previously in Mesechta Megillah and Mesechta Times. And then Nebuchadnezzar sent the big butcher, Nebuzaradan, which interestingly, after this entire story, and he killed so many Jews and the blood of Zechariah was boiling, he himself was so in awe in what was done and how Hashem let such a catastrophe happen to the Jewish people. And he himself ran away to a place where no one recognized him, found the Jewish community, converted, and became Jewish. Can you imagine Hitler becoming Jewish in a place where no one recognized him? And it describes how many people he killed and how many destruction he made in Yerushalayim. And he took everyone important out of the city, and he either killed them or he brought them to exile to Babylonia. He left only the poorest of the land to plow the land. He took all the treasures of Hashem. He took and he destroyed it. He melted it. Any gold, silver, copper, brought it to Babel. Describes all that, and then look what it says here in verse 18 and 19. This is where we're going to quote. The captain of the guard, Rab Tabachim. Tabachim means a butcher, called the captain of the butchers. He was a butcher of the Jewish people. There was a certain Nazi who the Jews, whatever, the Israeli Mossad killed him in South America. But he was in charge of the pogroms, instigator in Riga, in the ghetto. And one of the things they did is they went into a kosher butcher shop and unfortunately, savagely killed many Jews, hung them on the meat hooks and stamped them with the kosher onto their bodies.
His name was Skarzeny.
Skarzeny?
Skarzeny.
Whatever. And the Baruch Hashem, he was killed.
You can find him on YouTube, the whole story of how the Israelis got him and that they made him into being an Israeli spy.
No, so someone else I'm speaking about.
That's the guy.
Okay.
Anyway,
they all should, Hashem will give them all what they deserve, together with all other enemies of the Jews.
It's beautiful that he was killed.
So he says he took sorry, let me X out of that. It says Nebuzaradan, the great butcher, he took Sraya, the Kohen Gadol, the head priest, Tzfanya, the second command priest, with Shloisha Shemer Asaf, and the three doorkeepers. Who are the three doorkeepers? So by the entrance of the Azara, the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash, you had what's called Armakalim. Either there were treasurers who were in charge of the finances, or the people would buy and sell, buy karbanas, sell karbanas, and they had all the keys of the Azara, of the Beis HaMikdash, in their hand. So he took all three of them. And from the city, he took an officer who was a general, and he took Chamisha Nashim, Meiroye Pnei HaMelech, and 5 men who were from the king's people which were found with the king, which were either advisors to the king, or they were the most important of everybody of the king. At the end of Yirmiyahu, I did not bring it up on the screen, no. At the end of Yirmiyahu, it does say that there were 7 people who were advisors to the Jewish king. So it says there were actually only 5 advisors, and 2 of them were soifrim, they were scribes, writing down everything that was said by the king. The Malbim writes in the beginning they had only 5 people in the king's cabinet, and they added another 2, perhaps added 2 during the wartime because they needed a war cabinet. That's what the Malbim writes. And Tosfos says that there were 2 scribes. You see, you go today to Independence Hall, and you'll see an old courthouse. And right in front of the judge are 2 people. There were scribes writing everything that happens, that came down. Now you have a stenographer on the side, but then they were sitting in the front. So they were Roye Pnei HaMelech, people who saw the king. And the three, so we see that in front of a king, you have three people, you have five people. So that's why sometimes you have three aliyos, sometimes you have five aliyos. And the Shiva, the seven, is from back to the Gemara, back to the Megillah, which is chapter 1. It says the king made a huge feast, called his wife Vashti to come. Vashti refused to come. The king called his 7 wise men. Who were they? And he gives you their names. One of them was Memuchan, who was Haman. But it says there were 7 wise men. Shiv'as Hasarisim. There were 7 people. Shiv'as, 7 officers of Persia and Media, who saw the king's face, who sat first in the kingdom. So when you're coming to see the king's face, meaning coming to get an aliyah, read the Torah and see Hashem, then you have either 3 people who saw the king's face, 5 people who saw the king's face, or 7 people who saw the king's face. And they were all brought, just to conclude what it says over there, they were all brought to the city of Rivla in Bavel, and Nebuchadnezzar killed them all. Right, so these were important people, advisors to the king, of the Jewish king, which were all killed by Nebuchadnezzar. So at any rate, we do see that when it comes to seeing the king, you have either 3, 5, 7, all different numbers. Now, these aren't just random people. They were wise people, but the fact that they're told about us says a Ritva, the Rishon, not even Chassidus, that the reason why there are 7 kings, 7 advisors to the king, is because Lamaila in heaven, there are 7 great officers, 7D angels, which guard over the nations, and which boil down to 7 main ones. So everything which happens down here corresponds to something which is above. There were 3 or 5 or 7 treasures to the Beis HaMikdash, guards of the king, advisors to the king, and these correspond to Lamaila, to above, to heaven. Now, the Jewish king, it's possible that there were more than 7 advisors, because look, it says, Meiroye Pnei Melech. They were from the people who saw the king. What do I mean they're from the people? That there are many people who are advisors to the king, and these 7 were from among them, meaning not all the Jewish advisors were abducted and killed. But if you look in the Megillah, it says, Shiva Asare Parasumodai, the 7 officers, Roye, the ones who saw the king. They weren't from among the advisors. They were altogether 7 advisors. So from the first place, not necessarily do you have a proof that you need 7 advisors. But here we see that you have specifically 7. And specifically 7, so we have a number for 7 on Shabbos. The Malbim writes, in addition to this, to explain. So 3 different categories. You have those who were guards or treasurers, people who were in charge of the keys in the Beis HaMikdash. You have 3 of them. 5 advisors to the king, and 7 advisors to King Achashverosh. Those who stand watch by the Beis HaMikdash, they're standing watch to make sure that the people who don't belong there should not go in, but more than that, they would be their maklin. If you would pay them money, and you would get you would pay money to those in the base, guarding the Beis HaMikdash, and you would receive a plumba. You would have like a clay coin, which they will give you, which would have a letter on it, which you could bring a carbon. You go to the storehouse, give it to them, and they will give you flour. They will give you an animal to bring as a carbon. On a weekday is when we get money, we receive money. We deal with our finances. We have to work the entire day in order to be able to learn when we cannot. So the three guardians, or the three treasurers of the Beis HaMikdash who held the keys to the Beis HaMikdash, correspond to the weekday when we're preparing for the Shabbos. Through them, through these treasurers is how you enter. They were the portal to enter the Beis HaMikdash. You had to deal with them. So in a similar sense, the weekdays are a portal how to enter the Shabbos. So on Monday and Thursday, when we read the Torah on the weekdays, we have 3 aliyos. On Yom Tov, we have 5 aliyos corresponding to the 5 advisors to the king. Because here we are seeing the king. It's a time of holiness. On Shabbos, we have 7 advisors, and it's even a greater level of holiness and spirituality. We see the king even in a greater way than even on Yom Tov. And therefore, we have one place we have 5 advisors to the king, one place 7 advisors to the king. So on Yom Tov, we have 5 aliyos, and on Shabbos, we have 7 aliyos. Yom Kippur, we're going to get to it soon. Why on Yom Kippur do we have 6 aliyos? The Gemara will soon bring another proof from Ezra. Tani Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Shloisha Chamisha V'Shiva. He taught a similar thing to what we just discussed in the Brisa. Some days, which is Monday, Thursday, Shabbos, Mincha, we call 3 people to the Torah. Some, which on Yom Tov, we have 5 people called to the Torah. Some are 7 people called to the Torah. We have Shloisha Shemer Asaf, Chamisha Merei Pnei HaMelech, Shiva Rei Pnei HaMelech. 3 correspond to the guards at the door of the Beis HaMikdash. 5 correspond to the advisors of the king, and 7 corresponds to the advisors of King Achashverosh. Amalei Abaya says, my time 3 pages ago in the Gemara, you gave us different reasons why we have 3 aliyos, Kohen Levi Yisrael. You gave us different reasons why we have 5 aliyos, because extra holiness and extra holiness. Why didn't you tell us these reasons until now? This reason of either Birchas Kohanim, you have different amounts of words in every verse of Birchas Kohanim, 3, 5, and 7, or the other reasons of the guardians of the Beis HaMikdash, advisors of the kings. Why are you waiting so long to tell us this? Amar Lei told him, I didn't know that you needed to have a reason. I didn't know that you needed to have a reason explained. I thought you were already familiar with the Brisa. Remember, Rav Yosef, he was blind, he was a baki, he was fluent, the foremost expert in Brisas, in teachings of the Tanaim. So he says, I did not know. I thought you already knew these Brisas, which we taught you before. And I didn't think I need to explain to you this. Why? Because you always, whenever you have a question, you ask me, and I always answer you right away. So the fact that you didn't ask me, I thought that you knew it already. I assumed that you already knew the answer. And did it ever happen that you asked me something and I did not give an answer? Since you did not ask me, I figured that you already knew the answer, and therefore I did not have to explain you this thing. But Brisa of Rav Yosef goes according to a second opinion, right? That corresponds to the amount of parts by the king or in the Beis HaMikdash, not according to the first opinion verses of Birchas Kohanim. Fine. Tomorrow we'll learn Mirz Hashem about why do we have 6 aliyos on Yom Kippur.
On Yom Kippur you don't have 7 aliyos, right?
In Kippur, unless it's Shabbos, in Kippur we have 6 aliyos.
Oh, but then you read the Torah again
Shkach.
later.